Hello, everybody. Welcome to the new year GX community meetup. Hope it's going well for folks so far. Um, so we will be starting out today like most meetups, which is that we'll be doing some community celebrations and some roadmap updates. After that, I have some general announcements, and also we're going to be very excited to announce public preview kickoff, which you might have also seen in Discourse and Slack. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then we will hear some more updates about GX 1.0, as well as a cloud demo. So hold on tight. Okay, so first of all, community celebrations. As always, we are just extremely grateful for the people in the chat who are helping other users, helping people troubleshoot and solve their problems. So everyone listed here are folks that helped with that, who either helped solve another problem or shared a solution or yeah, something like that. So special shout out also to Tobias, Han, and Lori, who helped quite a few people this month. Okay. I also wanted to shout out about this blog post, which just came out last week by Jose Correa. Jose is a GX champion. Additionally, Jose presented on this topic at last month's community meeting. So if you saw that and were interested to read more about it or find more info, you can find it here. And Aaron, could you pop that link in the chat as well? So people have access. And then, yeah, you can check that out. Okay. Oh, right. So actually, I'm going to now pass this over to Eric, who will be doing a product roadmap update. Eric, would you like to take it away?
Hey all, I'm Eric, product manager here at Great Expectations, and just wanted to share a lot of exciting updates for GX Cloud. So last month we focused on improving managing data with the Cloud UI. So for Snowflake data sources and assets, you could now create, read, update, and delete all of the sources and assets for Snowflake. So this includes like editing the name of assets or data sources, updating the connection details for GX Cloud to connect to your data sources, as well as we added support for time-based splitters, such as year, month, day, so users can specify the specific subset of their SQL table to validate. So if your data is arriving on a daily basis, then you just want to validate those specific records. You now can configure that in the UI on the creation workflow. Separately, we added an expectation change log, so bringing visibility to the updates for your team's expectations, surfacing, all of the metadata such as who did what when. So if you have a set list of tests and that you want to keep track of who has made some updates and potentially reach out to them for clarification, we now have some tie to the specific user who did those operations. Coming soon, we have a referential integrity expectation coming soon. So this is within the same source, comparing column values present in another table. So if you had two different Snowflake tables and you wanted to define some referential check, we're prototyping, and it's going to be launching soon. It's in the dogfooding stage. And lastly, we're transitioning from a user agent to an org agent. So this allows for faster setups for teams. So let's say you wanted to connect to Snowflake data source and allow all of your other team members and stakeholders to interact with them in the Cloud UI. You could run an agent and host it in a cloud provider that you have access to, so that all of the next users can just experience the magic of cloud without any of that initial setup. So it's a great way for providing more interactivity to profile data, to quickly validate your expectations and more magic. That's it for the updates, Molly. Any
Awesome.
questions, please reach out in Slack or DM me.
Cool. Thanks so much, Eric. Okay, I have some announcements slash reminders. First of all, I thought I would just flag that we have a few openings here at Great Expectations. So if you're a software engineer or interested in product marketing, manager position or a senior UX designer, please apply. If you know anyone else who would be good for the role, send it along. Okay, also just that we've mentioned this before, but I just thought I'd give a reminder on it, which is that PRs are paused until 1.0 release, which is aimed to be in another couple months. And it's just because we'll be updating a lot of the code base significantly leading towards 1.0, and we don't want contributors to spend effort only to have things we implement break, for us to implement a breaking change of something that just done. But we will be excited to return to begin accepting them again after the 1.0 release. Additionally, I have an update about the community calendar. Some of you might be subscribed to our community calendar. Unfortunately, there were issues with the older calendar subscription, which meant that if we were to change the date of something or update it on our end, it would not show up on the user's end, on the person who had subscribed to the calendar. And that was an issue. So we have adjusted how we do that so that now we don't have that problem anymore. So I'll just, I have the link here where you can subscribe to the calendar. So basically you'll come to this page, you'll click follow calendar, and then it'll be added as an additional calendar. You can toggle on and off on your calendar. This is in my Gmail. So if you are subscribed to the GX community calendar that has these next few dates on it, and that's it, you've got the right calendar. That's great. If, however, you have a GX community calendar that repeats a monthly event forever until the end of time, basically, that is the old subscription. Delete that calendar. The links are old. And then you can subscribe to our current calendar. So apologies for any confusion that may have caused, but we're glad to have it updated. Okay. Also, we are very excited. This is the bigger announcement of all, is that we're officially kicking off public preview of GX Cloud on February 21st. We'll be having an event. This means that we're officially opening up GX Cloud for signups. And if people are curious, well, what does public preview mean? So rather than a big external facing event, this event and the invitation to sign up for clouds is really specific to folks who are current members of the GX community, which includes y'all. So come to the event for a live walkthrough of the cloud product. You'll get a chance to hear from folks behind the product and a chance to ask questions as well. Additionally, we are hosting a Snowflake workshop on February 22nd. I think we're actually also firming up a second date, which we will post about soon. This is a hands-on workshop for Snowflake users, during which you will set up and run your first data quality tests with live support from GX developer advocates. After this event, you will have an up and running implementation of GX Cloud. So we request that folks come prepared with their Snowflake setup. Spots are limited. Sign up. You can go to this link, which has been posted in the chat, and sign up for one, the other, or both. And as we have more workshop slots, they will be added there as well. So hope to see you all there. Woo! Okay. And speaking of opening up cloud signups, we will have a presentation soon well, at first, actually, we will be hearing from James, who will be talking about GX 1.0 updates, showcasing what's been worked on. I believe also requesting some feedback, so be ready for that. And then after that, we'll also be hearing from a GX engineer who'll be showing off some new cloud features. So, perhaps this will get you excited to see the more expansive demo that will include many more features to be given at public preview next month. This is just one feature that has been completed recently. And additionally, following public preview, you'll be seeing a lot more of this kind of content, as we'll want to keep the community up to date about new features, both in OSS and in cloud. Okay, so without further ado, James, I'm going to pass it on to you. People have heard enough of my voice. Take it away.
We love it. Plus, I have to admit, Molly, at one point you said that's y'all, and it just like warmed my heart. I don't know. I love it. We don't have enough people who are y'all sayers in our group. So
I'm a big y'all sayer. Yeah.
well, awesome. Let me share. I want to talk about custom expectations in the 1.0 release. And partly I want to do just a bit of background on what custom expectations are, but then I want to talk through how we're planning to implement them today. And as when I've talked with folks in this group in the past, I'm really interested in getting your feedback and questions and ideas for any changes that would be relevant for you to make sure that these work really well for the kinds of data quality checks that you need to author. So first, what are custom expectations? With one of the core things we're trying to do with Great Expectations is ensure that you can really completely describe your data. And ideally, that means using all the same language that you're already using inside your organization. Custom expectations are a really central part of how that happens, because they make it so that you can make your data docs, for example, the web pages that describe your data, reflect exactly how you're thinking about the data. There are kind of three different goals here that we're talking about with custom expectations. One is making sure that they're easy to write. So we want to be easy for data developers to author their tests. Second is we want to make sure that they give you sufficient control over the way that the shared resources that an organization or a team looks at, the things that come up in data docs, validation results, the way that they appear, so that it's very clear what the tests actually mean and they make sense to everyone. And then lastly, it's so that people who aren't necessarily in writing SQL or Python day to day, but that they can still define their expectations using all of the business logic that they need to. With those design goals, we've kind of broken up the expectations into three buckets. The first are core expectations. So those are ones that we all use all the time, like expect column values to be inset or expect column to exist. These are things that are addressing schema, missingness, volume, value statistics. And I know we're talking about custom expectations, but I think it's important to just remember like just how many of the kinds of use cases that our current users are using, of course, come from this set. So we definitely wouldn't expect people to use the fewer core expectations. But before, there was really just one kind of like custom expectations. We just differentiated core and custom. And now we're adding a bit more granularity to the distinction, or to those different types. So the next one is this concept of a simple custom expectation. And so the idea here is you're really just kind of recycling a core expectation, but you're locking some parameter. I'll talk through some examples in a second, but for example, if you had expect column values to be between that expectation, you could write, expect the values to be between 0 and 9. And that makes sense, and that's a really valuable test.
But if you lock that in, you can also rename the expectation and control the data docs so that it describes exactly what the reason is for why the value should be between 0 and 9. What are the kind of business objectives that have led to that being the appropriate data quality rule? And then differentiating that from a complex custom expectation where you can really just encode basically arbitrary business logic, including calls to external libraries. So you might like call out even to a web service as part of validation. And that could be done only in the context of a complex custom expectation. Actually, let me pause for a second. Do any questions about that as like an initial framing? I'm going to walk through some examples here in a second. Okay, I think examples will be good then. So let me pick a first one. So this is what we are currently planning for the API for authoring a new simple custom expectation. Now, to be clear, in the UI, you wouldn't necessarily need to write a class. We can make a helper to support this. But the basic idea is that we are taking an existing expectation, in this case, expect column values to be between, and we're giving it a new descriptive name, a valid passenger count. And then we're basically pre-parameterizing the expectation. So we've filled in all of the parameters that the expect column values to be between expectation needs. We're describing, the column, this is going to apply to the passenger count column. The min value is going to be 0, the max value is 9. And then we're also giving a description for how this should be rendered using Markdown. When I want to use this expectation at this point, the only thing I need to do is add a expect valid passenger count expectation. And there's no more parameters needed at this point to add the expectation. So for the authoring this kind of simple one, this would be all that's required. Let me pause again for a second. Any kind of questions, comments, concerns? And there's this typo in const, that's mine. I'm just noticing jumping out of me.
I'm just wondering if if I were taking the whole passenger, let's say, data, I wonder if you are only passing as parameters the common general expectation. I wonder how readable could it be from a simple view to know what are the parameters being called there. So, right now where I'm initiating the expectation, if I read the list of expectation, I'm able to assess more or less what are the ranges, what are the values. But with this layer on top of this, I wonder how readable could be a customized list only made of these simple custom expectations.
Do you mean when you're authoring the expectation or when you're adding it to a particular data set?
When I'm reading, I'm mostly thinking about text files and thinking about dump the configuration and reading the list of the expectation to see what is being checked.
Ah, yes.
So if the only parameter is the top level and I don't see any of the parameters being called on the
Right.
I wonder if the output, I understand this is more code that later on needs to be processed, maybe in the docs, maybe it's later used to render in the output, and I think it's valuable, but I'm still in the file regular plain base where I put all my needed configuration lines one after the other.
And specifically, you're talking about like a JSON file that is like your expectation suite.
Totally.
Yeah. That's a great point. And what we imagine is that the need to look in that file and look at that format really basically melts away when you're in the context of cloud, because you can see all the expectations that are being configured. So in that case, instead of opening up a JSON file, you'd be going to the expectation suite configuration page. And in that page, what you would see is there should be between 0 and 9 passengers.
Yeah.
And so you'd be kind of controlling it via this render text flag, but yeah, I appreciate that. Any other questions there? So one thing I would call out here, and the reason I put this example with my my typo in it is I wanted to kind of indicate this, like, currently, even based on this way of defining an expectation, there is definitely an element of coordination in your team, or at least just kind of contract with the team, because while what we're basically doing is providing default values, so one could still override these values, and if you did that, you would see the additional parameters in the JSON file or in the raw expectation configuration. You can also add this kind of const annotation in order to really encourage you not to override that annotation, or that default rather. Okay. And I just want to give one more kind of like example. This is fundamentally the same, just based on a different one. So this one, we're looking at expect column values to match regex as the base. And we're defining a expect valid ICD-10 code expectation. All we're really doing is kind of hard coding a regex and rewriting the data documentation. So again, if we were in our cloud product and looking at the expectation suites that you've defined, and you wanted to share that with someone and say, hey, here are the expectations for this data, what they would see is the code should be a valid ICD-10 code. And I think, Caesar, what I'm hearing, and I really like this, is one thing we could do is actually make it so that, for example, by hovering over or some other way, they get to see like what the actual check is behind that. So that the tech, obviously we could have the render text include the regex, but actually part of the reason to do this is that the regex is just like very hard to read. That's not actually very informative. And so having it, having you be in more control over the text is generally a good thing. But I'm kind of liking that idea of show parameters as a pop-up, perhaps. Any other questions, comments, concerns on this one?
So I think this is a step into the right way, because way too often I've seen in the Slack that someone is building their own custom expectations, like the last example, the passenger count, and they are checking is it a sedan or is it a coupe or whatever, and then for those giving the values, where if you just have a custom or dynamic, you can only have it in your organization. I feel like this is the solution for that, so we don't get crowded with expectations that makes sense to some but not everyone.
Yes. Okay. You also, your example of saying, like, is it a sedan or is it a coupe? That's a great one for me to kind of think of as, because we would model that with a condition on the expectation, a conditional expectation. So we might even need to kind of make sure that there's a good way to kind of bundle together expectations. That's another thing we've been working on, is, like a bundle that would say, valid number of passengers might decompose into a sedan and 1 to 4, or an SUV and 1 to 7, or something like that. But not planning to do that in this, like in the core 1.0, but that makes a lot of sense. I mean, you can do the conditional expectations, but they're still one at a time. Okay. So next kind of example. Oh, sorry, I'm hopping around a little bit. Is SQL. So one thing we've heard a lot is we really want to be able to write our logic in SQL. And so, there's kind of, I want to walk through basically 3 different variations of that here. So this first one is just literally, I'm taking a SQL query that returns unexpected rows, and then I'm controlling the way that that should be rendered in Datadocs. The problem with this one is that right now, basically, if we look at line 4, I have a from statement, and that from statement isn't going to be tuned to any particular validation, which makes the expectation not so portable. So the main thing that we are planning to do is ensure that there is a parameterization in that from clause that you're authoring. So this would be the modified version of my query where I'm saying batch, you have to draw it from the batch that's being validated. This is great for expressivity. I think one thing I really like about this approach, again, is the ability to control the data docs. What I'm expecting, and one thing I kind of like, the specific question I have on this is, my baseline is that we should actually raise an error in the event that there is no batch parameterized here. Because we and just tell the user, hey, this is not a valid configuration. You need to parameterize the specific batch. But really quickly, this is a very basic one. I've got a slightly more interesting one in a second. Looking at this approach to being able to author a SQL expectation, what questions, comments, or concerns do people have?
May I add that as I was reading this, it's not just related to this particular SQL example, but when I find it a bit, I don't know, maybe it's confusing, the render text. It's absolutely, because what you're trying to get here is not the render text. You are trying to get the data quality requirements. You know what I mean? What you're trying to get in that field is what kind of check are you running for data quality? Yeah, I think it could be maybe more clear, even if it's more verbose. But
Yeah.
I think in the future there might be one content that is the check. What are you checking? And maybe the render text or the auxiliary docs is like a longer string. So I think like maybe it's useful in somehow to split between this is the short version of what I'm checking in terms of data quality, and this is explanation,
Yeah.
render text, doc string, whatever.
Yeah, almost. I mean, it sounds like maybe you're like even a test description, something like that, or
I'm a big fan of the
requirement.
meta fields. To
You
add
are a big fan, or
additional,
you're not a big fan?
I'm a big fan
Yeah,
in terms of getting data quality dimension, data quality metrics, and
right.
additional information there. So this is the reason I'm trying to be a bit like, okay, this is a data quality requirement. This is a
Right.
data quality metric. This is a whatever. Instead of just render text, because it's a bit like generic.
Yeah, it's too generic, unclear what's going on. Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. I will say, I don't think we've talked about this in this forum, but we're planning to take the notes field that's currently in Meta and promote that up to being a primary field on all of the expectations in the 1.0 API. And it makes me think, your comment makes me think we also kind of disambiguate and clarify the role of
I think that would make even more confusing if there is a notes text and a render text. I think it's be more clear about what's inside of each
what
one.
is which one. Yep.
It could be more convenient.
Okay, that's really useful. Any other questions on this one? Let me go to the next one. So this is basically the same idea, except for basically a bit more complicated of a query. So whereas this previous expectation, this could be done exactly as expect column values in set. With this expectation, that's not possible. We're making a slightly more interesting assertion about the data, that there's only exactly one, or I probably should say exactly one, but this test is currently saying no more than one logout event in a session. So I think the questions about render text make sense here. Obviously we've got the same thing going on with batch. Critically, what would be displayed in the event of a failure are going to be the result of the result of running this query. So in this case, what we would see is, a pair of like the session IDs that were violated and how many logout events happened in that session that where you only expected one.
Sorry, but I'm getting really confused, and maybe I'm missing something. But in the Python version, we had like simple custom expectations. SQL expectations are meant to be like simple custom SQL expectations.
That's right. So that's right. We'd still consider this a simple custom expectation. And the reason is because it has a very kind of simple structure to it where you're providing basically two pieces of information, an unexpected rows query. So you're providing a query that returns rows that you don't expect in your data. And potentially to be, this to be renamed thing, the name of the way that you would expect it to appear.
I mean, how would you call this? I don't know if you have any examples here about are you call it? I mean, because one of the big changes regarding actual expectation is this ability to wrap the underlying expectation with a custom name. I don't know if here you are getting like expect no more logout event per session.
You know what? You're absolutely right. And that's a mistake. That's a mistake in my presentation. What I should have written this as is, class name of expectation, which is a subclass of SQL expectation. I'm sorry, that was just me failing.
No worries. I just was trying to think if there was something different in terms of syntax between the Python and the SQL one. That would be quite confusing. But if it's the same and it's just like
that's right, it's intended to be exactly the same. Thank you very much. Okay. So the next slide is just like, so where are we planning to be for 1.0 is basically exactly this feature set. So if you are already using a custom metric that did something exotic like call out to a machine learning library or a web service or something like that, we're not planning to, we're basically planning to make that API private as part of 1.0, which means those kinds of expectations would be not supported for a while until we create a public version of that API, which we intend to do in a way that's simpler to support to support more flexibility around the way that we define metrics and support for different execution engines. What we found is that those metrics were very difficult for people to reason with and maintain. And so one of the hallmarks of this design that you're seeing here was that there was no mention of metrics at all. All of that is part of the underlying expectation. So the underlying expectation handles getting any metrics associated with the information that you get, including the case of the SQL query. Any questions about that? I know that's kind of that's maybe a tricky part because there will be some functionality that is not going to be part of 1.0. What I think is true and what I'm hoping to hear from you all, if there's cases where you're using others of the other kinds of complex custom expectations, is that these simple expectations are actually going to allow you to cover the use cases that you're needing to be able to cover today. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for weighing in, for listening. I really appreciate it. Bunch of things for us to take as notes here and improve. If you think of something afterwards, obviously, or you're watching this afterwards and you'd like to share those, please reach out. It's really valuable. I'm super excited about frankly, I'm really excited about all the simplifications that are coming. I think it'll allow people to be able to really define the quality rules that they need much more easily. So thank you, Molly. Thanks, Becca, and back over to you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, James. Okay. Well, we have one more presentation. Rob is going to be talking about a new cloud feature, which again, you're going to hear a lot more about more features and be able to see a big demo next month at the public preview. But today, Rob will be talking about using cloud to validate data assets in batches by date. So Rob, feel free to take it away.
Great. Thanks, Molly. So as Eric alluded to earlier, a feature that we recently added to cloud is the ability to split your data assets into batches and validate in batches. So just as some quick setup information, I have this Snowflake data source with about 18,000 rows. It's about restaurants. So yeah, so if we go into GX Cloud, I can add a data asset. I'll be adding this to my existing data source. And then type in my table name, data asset name. And so before we'd add this asset and define expectations. And then when you would go in and validate, it would validate everything in that restaurants table. But now we can specify that we want to validate the data asset in batches using what we call splitters. And so for now, we have the ability to split the asset according to year, year and month, or year, month, and day. There are other splitters in open source that are not in the UI yet. You can still use them with cloud. You just wouldn't be able to add them in the UI. So for now, I'll just say I want to split by year and month. And then we'll provide the name of a column that has a date time that we want to split by. So we'll use date updated. All right, and then we'll go ahead and add that data asset. All right, so baking show style, I'm going to go into an asset that I already created with some simple expectations. I have this expectation that should fail if we validate by batch, because I'm saying that I expect the row count to be between 18,000 and 20,000. So since we're validating it by batch, we would actually not expect that. And then just checking for that column. And so now when we go into validate, we can specify whether we want to validate the entire data asset, so the entire restaurants table, or a custom batch. And so I choose a date. So let's say I want to validate July 2016. Hit validate. I see that the grid expectations agent has picked that up. Let's give that a second. All right, so that has been validated, and we see that this expectation failed because we only observed 908 rows, which is, yeah, just showcasing that we didn't actually validate a batch with the full data asset. Yeah, that's it for batches and splitters. Does anyone have any questions, feedback? All right.
Can you
All right.
compare? Can you compare 1 month or one of the splits against other?
A second.
Like for example, let's say I want to say that I want to check that the number of, like here you're checking the number of rows is between a minimum and a maximum. And I wonder if it could be possible to say, I want the difference in this column between 1 month and the next month to be less than 10%, for example.
Oh, I see. We don't have that ability yet. That sounds like a multi-batch case where you would basically be comparing two batches.
We also have all the metadata to build that kind of metric store where you could pick the latest validation result values and use it for your next expectation. That's a great idea though, Cesar.
Yeah, I think, for example, Molly knows from the use case that I'm always following, that is the open data. It's quite common to get yearly files or monthly files. So being able to compare that, if the files from different years or months or similar things are different, I think that could be very useful as a added feature, being able to get the files there. I see the question there. I'm working mostly with CSV files, so I'm not splitting them on SQL. So,
Yeah, you're just treating it as the only batch of data.
yeah, like 1 year against other years. But once, if you are lucky and are able to get the big file, then being able to split it to parts and compare them, could be quite interesting.
Yeah,
Cool.
Eric,
Thanks for that feedback.
is that a question you were interested to open up to the group?
Yeah, like as we work to add more configuration to accommodate splitting your data by multiple columns, by column values, by a range. Right now we have just a few time-based dimensions, but yeah, curious to how in the open source anybody here splits their data for SQL, because I know in Pandas and Spark you probably just treat the file as the batch.
May I ask a question? Hello,
Sure.
can you hear me?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. So
Thank you, Rob, by the way.
Yeah, thank you, Rob.
I have a problem. So in the cloud account, we are try to create a new table and asset. So the table name and asset name should be the same. So it does not make sense. For example, if I have the data asset called unified, the table name I have unified revenue and unified cost. I have to create two data asset name. So it does not make sense, right? So I want to use one data asset name unified and include two tables, unified cost and unified revenue, but I cannot do it.
I don't know if we could triage on the call, but I know we don't support duplicate data asset names from the same source. So in theory, you should be able to create a data asset revenue, data asset sales, and if it's from the same source table, that's totally fine.
Yeah, and I think one clarification is that the data asset name and the table name do not have to be the same.
Yeah.
You could name your, like, your table name needs to be the name of the actual table, you're connecting to, but your data asset name could be whatever you want it to be.
The problem is, for example, I want to normally, so in one data asset, we should include many tables, right? So right now,
one data asset will map to one table. A data source can have multiple data assets, but the data asset itself, cannot be comprised of multiple tables.
Okay.
Yeah.
Misunderstanding.
Yeah. One-to-one for table to data asset, but one-to-many for data source to data asset.
Yeah, but normally in the data warehouse, we have one data set and includes many tables, right? That's the common sense.
Yeah, such that, your database or your data warehouse would be your data source, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's like a bug. I think so. I think for the data engineers, they all know for one data set should have many tables, right? Not like one data set or one table. It does not make sense. Sorry.
It's okay. So it sounds like that was helpful. You got some clarity there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and thanks to the presentations today. I want to remind folks that if you have feedback on anything you heard today, any of the updates on 1.0 or the feature that Rob just presented on, or anything else really, like please tell us. You can post in the feedback channel in Slack. There's also a feedback topic in Discourse. Yeah, we'd love to hear it. And check out the public preview event and register for the event. It'd be really great to see you all there. And what was oh yeah, last reminder is please reach out as well if you have an interest, like if you would like to present on your Great Expectations use case, show off a demo, anything like that. It'd be great to work with you. So please reach out to me. You can reach out to me in Slack. I think that's it for us. Way to test this.
Well, this is a very strange question. Maybe I could clarify.
Sure.
For the last for the last 6 months, you know, I've been very curious about this intersection between large language model and testing data quality, and how to get from PDF to actual expectations. And one of the questions I have in my mind is there any way to check if some code is a valid expectation without running the whole, because you know, you could always like test and try to add to an expectation suit to create a context. But I wonder if there is, well, given the James presentation, maybe now there are even more checks too, because most of the core expectations are in the core directory and you can check the name, but regarding the parameters, and I was wondering, I don't know if is there any quick, fast method. I'm trying to get like this issue solved when I see an expectation and I say, check if this is an expectation with the valid parameters. And this question is only relevant if you are trying to figure out if the parameters are min max value or minimum value or mean value, or what is, you know, every function has a certain arguments, but I mean, is this
So like a unit test for the test.
Yeah, I was thinking like, if you sort all the expectation in some kind of AST tree, you could map like, okay, this parameter is only used by this 7 expectation, and you could like create the whole branches of the tree, but only if the number of expectations is limited. If we get you to add custom expectation, well, in the end, it's just another layer of the, yeah. So it's kind of unit testing, but yeah, it's like trying to, if there is like, check this, well, expect this to be a valid expectation. I was wondering if there's any kind of sort of function like this that could be useful. I don't know.
Yeah, for the documented expectations, there should be some sample schema or sample data to test as you're creating them. But for those unbounded SQL query checks that you could write any kind of logic, yeah, best practice would be to define a few rows that are that would fail or would pass.
Yeah. Now that you're talking about it, I think it's more like a syntax check, just like, because of course you cannot test if what's inside the brackets of the SQL code is actually testing the right thing, but at least you know that it's actual SQL code.
Oh,
or not.
okay. Got it.
Okay. Well, if you have any ideas, just feel free to.
I'll do. Thank you.
Yeah.
If everything works right, I think Molly, we could talk about this with a presentation on the next month meeting.
Yeah, thanks for the interesting topic. And if you have more thoughts or anything on it, obviously, like, you know, reach out on that or anything else really. So yeah. So I think I think we're good. I think thank you everybody for coming. Thanks to you know, members who came and gave feedback and thoughts, really super appreciated. And we'll see you all next month for public preview.